Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and today we are talking to Dr. Riikka Pietilainen-Caffrey. Riikka is one of the newest members of the ACDA Standing Committee for Advocacy and Collaboration. And the second that we spoke on the phone going through the process of getting her added to that committee, you can just hear her heart for meaningful collaborations and her drive for finding ways to impact students in new and innovative, and it's just so palpable. And we're calling this episode Talk It Out because Riikka does a great job at just telling the stories and giving you ideas for how you too can find meaningful collaborations. We talk specifically about how she ended up from Finland in the US and how she got her doctorate and why she's working at community colleges and what she's done along the way. But we've also talked about the education aspect of community college life, and then overall through choral music, equity, accessibility, and diversity in just the choirs and programs. And she's going to give you some steps. Well, I identify some steps that she gives us when she's talking on how you too can have meaningful collaborations. I'm really excited for you to get to know Riikka. I enjoyed our time together so much. This episode is one of the ACDA Advocacy and Collaboration Committee's series, and we are thrilled that it is sponsored by Kinnison Choral Company and Kaleidoscope Adventures. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and let's get on with the show. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are welcoming one of my newest friends and one of the new members of the ACDA Advocacy and Collaboration Committee, Dr. Riikka Pietilainen-Caffrey. Hey, Riikka.
Hi, Emmy. How are you?
I'm so excited to get some quality time with you.
Thank you. Me too. I'm very excited about our future collaborations and the collaboration today.
Yes. Well, I'm very excited about your interests and what you're bringing to the table for the committee. And I think there's going to be some really fantastic resources and blog posts and all sorts of things that come out of it. But let's let the listener get to know you first. Who is Riikka, and how did you get into the choir world?
I am from Finland, and in Finland, everybody sings. It's in anywhere else in the world, or mostly in the US, if I ask people, do you sing? I get the answer like, oh, I'm not a singer. But in Finland, everybody sings. Communal singing is part of like all school events, like the fall party and the spring party. And there's often gathering, like when there's gathering of people, like the summer I was in my mom's summer cottage. It's like a small cottage village where everybody has their own little house in this big communal summer cottage place. And cool. at the like the midsummer party, there's always the midsummer party. It's like the summer solstice that we're celebrating. There's communal singing even there. Somebody held a keyboard and then we all sang. They distributed sheet music and words to the music, and everybody sings. So the first half an hour of the party was just everybody singing, and every single person was singing. So in Finland, it's just part of life. And when I was 16, I was born 100 kilometers down from the Arctic Circle. So up north, and it's a lot of dark and everything, but excellent music education. I studied piano at the conservatory since I was 7. And so then come high school time, I decided that I have to leave. It's time to go to bigger circles. So I moved all by myself to the capital, to Helsinki, 900 kilometers away, 850, something like that, kilometers away, to attend a music high school, the Sibelius High School. And it's like a special program that everybody's either dancer or a musician. You pick one of those tracks and you can replace like you take some topics, but you can replace, and I regret this now, but geography, biology, chemistry, and physics, and all of those classes you can replace by music classes. So instead I studied singing, choral singing, I played chamber music trio, and then I can't remember the other classes, but you were able to replace like music history, solfege, all of that was part of the basic curriculum of the high school. So this is where I met Marjukka Riihimäki, who is amazing, wonderful choral music educator. She just sparks this light when she enters the room, and with her singing in her choir, I was gone. She talks about the fire that her mentors inspired in her, but she has this light and this fire that I was hooked for life ever since singing in her choirs. And I actually, on my last year before I was graduating, she had this like a women's chorus called Philomela that is very famous in Finland. And she needed a soloist for it. It was a shouting solo. And she needed somebody to come and shout with her choir. And she's like, Riikka, you're pretty loud. I said, yeah, I can be loud if needed. So I went to be a soloist with this group. And then after I graduated from high school, I sang with them for a few years. And we traveled all over the world. And it was just so amazing. And then I was very decided that I want to be a jazz musician and I want to play in smoky clubs in New York. So I came to Greenwich, Connecticut as an au pair. And every weekend and evenings, I came to the city to take lessons, saxophone lessons, and singing lessons on Manhattan. And I applied and I got accepted to the city college. And then I went back home to Finland and worked 3 jobs. But then I got the Fulbright undergrad scholarship that paid for my undergrad education at the city college. So that's how I ended up in the US at the first place.
Wait, before you go back, we cannot just rough over.
Okay.
You came to the US because you wanted to be a jazz musician in a smoky club in New York.
Yes.
That is very specific. Where did you get that idea?
I had a bucket list of things that I want to do at some point. Being a musician was being a starving musician. I've tried that. It wasn't as glamorous as I thought. And being a ski bum, I did that for a year after I graduated with my DMA. And then the third one was be a doctor. So I did that. So now I've tried all 3 aspects and now I have to make a new bucket list.
Oh my gosh, you had a bucket list that involved play in a smoky bar, like be a Baroque musician.
Yes.
Go work on a ski resort and get a doctorate. Well, A, congratulations on completing your bucket list. But B, how did you get from struggling beach bum ski resort jazz musician to choir? How did it loop back to your passion that you found in high school?
Well, that's a long story, actually. So I was studying in New York and doing my undergrad in jazz performance. But again, the teacher influence there. I had amazing solfege teacher, Jonathan Pieslak, who has then written, he has studied bringing together heavy metal music and music theory. And he actually presented on conferences on meshuggah, analyzing meshuggah pieces and doing big papers on this. So it's wow, somebody can be that cool, that be a theorist and a doctor and do all this stuff. So I studied counterpoint and composition with him. And then John Motley, who's a legendary New York choral music educator, I was singing in his choir, and he was teaching me the Berton Coffin overtones of bel canto. That's what we did in lessons. And then I studied with Janet Steele, who was my choir and voice professor. And she said that, Riikka, we don't have a treble ensemble. And since you have this strong passion, especially for treble ensembles after Philomela, why don't you start one? And she gave me the opportunity to start my own treble ensemble that I got paid via scholarship to teach during my undergrad, but the students got a credit. So I was basically instructor at that time, but paid by scholarship because I was an international student. So I did that through my undergrad, and Jonathan Pieslak wrote pieces for us that we premiered, and you can find them on Earth Songs if you Google Las Sirenas. That was the name of my group. And we did a lot of other performances. And for my final project when I was graduating, I was trying to decide, what kind of recital am I going to do? And both of my teachers said that you have this thing for choral music, let's do a recital. So they allowed to finish my jazz degree with my own choral recital. I wrote a 10-movement piece for women's chorus and percussion.
Okay.
And it's based on my grandmother's Second World War time diaries. She gave me her like rewritten diaries with the poetry she had published, and I used her story as a basis. It's called Vie Valkea Aamu, as for this piece. And my high school friend happened to be in New York at the same time, living there, and she's a choreographer. She choreographed the entire, so it's through choreographed, and we were performing it at the Columbia University, at the Finnish church, and then we got invited to do a show at the Museum of Biblical Arts. They had like a wartime art exhibition, and we performed in the gallery.
Ooh,
It was unbelievable. So this project kind of was spreading, and I ended up, even when I got accepted to CU Boulder, I ended up staying for one more year because I had so many gigs that I had to finish these commitments there. And CU Boulder, that I went there mostly because of Burton Coffin and overtones of bel canto. So everything has kind of like had because Burton Coffin had been teaching, and like a lot of his influence is at CU Boulder. So I ended up going there for my master's, and I got to study with Patty Peterson, who studied with Barbara Doscher, who had then studied with Burton Coffin. So there's like long lineage of wonderful teachers, and Bonnie Draina, and just incredible teachers at CU Boulder. And then when I was finishing, they asked, would you want to stay for doctorate? And I said, sure, I'll stay for doctorate. And
bucket list.
Yeah, bucket list. I've had incredible, wonderful people, Larry Captain, Joan Conlon, I've had the best people in my life. And a lot of these things, they just were kind of happening, like one circumstance after another, with this passion that I had especially for treble choir music. That's always been my thing. And then I kind of got more into the SATB world at CU Boulder. But it's my mentors, it's my teachers. I keep very closely in touch with every single one of them. Mary Kay Guest, and then came to CU Boulder. And it's the people in my life that have a huge influence and impact. And I have to give all the credit to them. I wouldn't be here doing what I do today if it wasn't for the people and the opportunities they gave me.
I love it. It's serendipitous in a way. And the cool part is you were willing to take these opportunities, to do the work, to apply your passions. You knew how to verbalize your passions. I mean, you had a bucket list. So you knew how to verbalize your passions and your interests. And it's so awesome to see how that's played out for you. So fill us in, after the doctorate at CU Boulder, how did you end up in the Boston area?
Well, then I took I was working in a big church in Colorado while I was still doing my DMA, and I stayed. It was because I had a choir and I had like orchestra and everything. It was awesome. So I was just kind of staying there, and I went to teach at the ski school, and I got my level 1 PSIA. I'm a professional ski instructor.
Nice. So you can come with me next time we go, because I am awful, and my husband loves to snowboard, and he's like, black diamonds, and I'm like, bunny slopes.
I'm a trained professional. I'll take you.
Cool. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
To get people skiing.
Okay, so, cool. I'm petrified of falling over.
But I was teaching skiing. It's personally because of the community, and then it was part of my bucket list. But also, you get a free pass to ski pretty much any mountain. So I would check like, okay, where's the snow? Today is not the work day. Okay, I'll go where there is snow. So we lived up in the mountains, so it was pretty convenient. And then I got a call from a friend saying like, oh, I'm going on a sabbatical, and could you come and can you apply for this sabbatical position in Beirut, Lebanon? Whoa. This is fall 2013. And I was like, sure. I applied, and I moved to Beirut, Lebanon for a semester. And it was another life-changing experience. Again, the people I've met, we've kept in touch over these years. And when I came back to US, to Colorado, did some more skiing and more church work. And then I got a call that, okay, can you apply for this position in Walla Walla, Washington? I said, sure, I'll apply. And I applied, and I got accepted. And I moved to Walla Walla, Washington to be a visiting assistant professor at Whitman College. So many of these things have just they've been happening. And then 4 years there, I was like, okay, it's hard to travel to Finland from Washington State. So part of that was that East Coast would be better. My husband got transferred here, and I was like, okay, it'd be good to be in the same state, and somewhere where it's just 1 or 2 flights to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved to Boston, and here I am now.
Wow. Okay. Maybe
Who
the
knows
title.
where
I mean, this is
next,
impressive. Such a like it's all serendipitous, but your willingness to that's the inspiration. And I think it's so cool to hear when you just let go and say, "Sure, I'll try that." I mean, what's the like? Sure, I've been here 4 years. I'd like to get a little closer to family. Let's try Boston. Just that is so much fun, and that you honor the people that you've met along the way. That is a true heart of a servant leader. Okay, so you're in Boston, you're working at a community college, and you are huge into community college music education and equity and accessibility. Let's just dive into the meat of that. Tell us about what you're experiencing at the community college level with music education.
So how I got interested in it was because at Walla Walla, while I was teaching at Whitman, my partner in crime, Christy Vining, who's a composer and a fantastic collaborative pianist. I worked with her at Whitman, and I had commissioned pieces from her. She was also the accompanist and kind of composer in residence at the Walla Walla Community College. And then one of their teachers was on sabbatical, and they needed somebody to come and help with the voice classes and like assistant to the music theater production. So I said, sure, I'll come do that. So this again, one of those things that, oh, can you come? Do you want to come here? And I said, sure, that sounds really interesting. And I was just fascinated about the passion that the students at the community college had, because it wasn't like, okay, I'm in a residential campus and I do this and this and that. No, you take the bus to go to school, even in Walla Walla, where the buses don't honestly run that often. But you're taking a bus, or you take the bike or something. But the dedication the students had, that I want to get an education, and many of them then former students from they're attending doctoral programs and master's programs, and some went to Whitman, but they all had this passion to get the credits done as much as possible at the community college level, and then move to another institution, which I wish I had known about coming as an international student. It's a small fortune to come to US, to come to school. But I wanted to study with the best teachers, and those were the teachers I wanted to study with. So I think and I was thinking like, okay, I felt really at home with the students. We share a lot of them and I shared similar backgrounds, and I felt like, okay, I feel comfortable here. And then I came to interview at Bunker Hill, and I walk in the lobby, and I felt very comfortable. I felt like City College was my home, and Bunker Hill felt very similar because there were multiple languages spoken. All of a sudden, I wasn't the one with the funny accent or the one with the funny name, but I was part of like, oh, where are you from? Like, oh, what languages do you speak? In my community choir at Bunker Hill, we realized that we were singing Silent Night as the end of a concert. And it's like, okay, so what languages did we sing in? And we realized that the majority of the singers in that room, English wasn't the language that was mostly spoken. It was French.
Wow.
Because all of my Polish singers, my Haitian singers, my French singers, everybody, like the common language all of a sudden wasn't English anymore. So it was interesting, and the faculty is coming from all over the world. The students, we have a lot of international students, and just the diversity of every single classroom setting, every single faculty meeting. It's easier to, I guess it's something that I've, as an immigrant, we all kind of struggle figuring out. I'm too American when I'm in Finland, but then I'm too Finnish when I'm in the US. So finding that balance, what it means, I think Bunker Hill has been huge in that. And it's also the artist that I worked with, poet Rina Espaillat. She did the workshop with my choir, and she talked about that home is, you don't have to choose. but you can embrace your both homes, that being an immigrant can be like a binary, or you can embrace that being an immigrant as having this shared cultural wealth and taking, it's hard to explain. She explains it so much better. But for me, it was the moment when she said it and I just sat on it and I was like, wow. And I felt like that's the moment when I found comfort in, and I started calling myself Finnish American instead of just Finnish. It was very interesting that, okay, I've been here half of my life now. I can be part of this, and I don't have to choose. I can be both.
So once you made, so it sounds like you made those connections with your Bunker Hill students right away. Yeah. Once you had these moments and these workshops and the coming to terms with what it means to be an immigrant, do you see that changing your music programming or how you perform together? Or what did that play out like after the workshops?
I think I was always experimental, but I think I've embraced my European experimental side even more after that. And I've applied to, and I'm actually presenting in Portugal next week, that I've embraced that I don't have to just be in the US, but I can work, like, why not? Like, I can go back and work more in Europe and kind of bring more of that knowledge that I have so performance art in Europe is it's very different than in here. I guess, especially in the choral world, there's a lot more experimentation and different ways of programming concerts happening, and have been happening in Europe like for 20 years. Mostly, a lot of it is due to my mentor Riikka Pietilainen-Caffrey, but bringing more of that know-how and implementing it in my practice, be more willing to explore. And I think the one thing that I still have to remind myself, that who do you see, like who is in your room, not assuming anything, but every single student, even if they may say, oh, I'm a Finnish student, it's not the same story as my story. But that every single person in my choir, in the room, the space we share, they have a different story, and I have to treat everybody as an individual, and really using the individual strengths and the cultural wealth also in my programming. And that's something that I'm really doing more. Even this year I'm kind of pushing that box even more, the individual stories of my singers.
Are you doing that through the music that you're programming, or from how you're teaching the music?
Both, actually.
Okay.
So it's still like in the experimental stages. I'm not sure how so this is all like, it may work out. And as Marika always says, you try something. If it doesn't work out, you just put it aside, but never regret the time that you spent trying, because it's still brought you forward to a new level.
That's
so
good.
What we're doing this semester, I can't remember I think it's the past, the present, and the future, the stories of our lives. Something, it's still a working title, but we are looking at repertoire that so this semester is more like the building semester. There's always fall semester. It's the first semester we're actually coming fully back to campus.
Yes.
So it's going to be all new, that we're actually in a space. We have masks are optional, and it will be interesting to see. But we're looking at some repertoire that hasn't necessarily not been performed so much, but brings on some of the strengths of our program. We're collaborating with the Bunker Hill Jazz Ensemble, and we're doing a couple of the movements of the Duke Ellington Sacred Concert. And it was interesting because then I was talking to the jazz band leader, and he was like, yeah, I've actually played those pieces. Let me reach out to my pianist friend that I played them with. And he's like, oh, it's so exciting. Ruth Ellington actually gave me the original score. And I'm like, okay, great. So reaching out, there's always somebody like that. So of course I'm going to bring in John Cordelevs to talk about his relationship with Ruth Ellington and how all this work was happening. And my pianist, he's an incredible jazz pianist. I was like, why don't I just use the strength that I have in the group and program these pieces? Before the pandemic, we were working on a concert. The students wanted to sing about gun violence and police brutality. So we're doing Eugene Rogers' Glory, kind of coming back to it. We're working on it before the pandemic, and we have a lot of producers in our music program and incredible rappers. I was like, let's feature the strength that we have and the diversity of this community. And then Alicia Lee say her name. So that's more like there's like kind of multiple levels of past and present, something that in the near past that we worked before the pandemic started. But also looking at saying the names of the people that we cannot forget those names, although there's challenges like the pandemic in our life, but we cannot ignore the other problems that are happening. So those are kind of a couple of things. And then I'm working with a local group, Nekutish Singers. It's a group of native singers who are singing specifically the repertoire that women were singing to their children as an oral tradition. And it's a multi-generational group where there is the mother and a daughter and their relative. And we're working on finding some repertoire that they're going to come and teach to my singers. So there's the oral tradition part of it.
Yes, you're really addressing like not just the conversations that need to happen and the talents in your room, but it sounds like collaboration is just so easy and natural for you. What are the steps that you do to get these collaborations started? Like, do you identify, hey, I want to do this, and then reach out to the jazz group or the oral traditions group, or how do you start your collaborations?
A lot of these, it's like brainstorming. Like there's things in my head and I'm thinking like, okay, this is like, I had this idea that I want to do something like, I was going to reach out to my students because many of them come from different language backgrounds and different cultural backgrounds. And I had been talking to them like at an Albanian opera singer. And I said, let's do something from your like Albanian choral music. And we were talking about that. And I was talking to our director of events, who is a magician, who's the best at putting people together. And I started talking about, I have this idea of like our people's own stories, then building to the spring semester to kind of looking at the individual stories and then what is the common story. And he was saying that, why don't we just like do that in a different level, that you talk about these pieces, but then you kind of look at the past, present, and moment this semester, and we're building towards next semester when we're bringing some of the artists that the college has worked, like multiple of our artists in residence, into this bigger collaboration that is going to culminate to it. So we're going to, in the spring, perform a couple of these pieces that like the students are bringing, but then also commissioned a piece to tie all of these into this like one bigger suite. So I think the director of events, Kevin, and I, we both had this like idea that what we wanted to see at the college level happening in our heads, but then we started talking about it and all of a sudden it locks into place. And he's like, you should ask this person. And I'm like, oh, maybe this person. And we're tossing in the people and the program was forming very organically, pulling from the people we know, the people who worked with us, and then building into this whole. And Kevin always says that together we make magic happen. And it's this talking through and the collaborating that, and bringing in some alumni and reaching out to alumni that how can we help you now when you are navigating the world outside Bunker Hill. So also building on those traditions and the International Center really leaning into the strengths that the college has.
I think I have a title. I think we should call this episode Talk It Out. Because everything that you've talked about, it's been based on someone calling and you talking and like, sure, I'll try that. Or looking at your room and saying, oh, okay, we have a lot of talent in production and in rapping. Let's find the music that, and I think it's so interesting because you take the time to talk it out. These opportunities for music education and equity and accessibility and diversity within your community choirs, within your community college and your community college choirs, it's evident and it infiltrates outside of your room into the community at large. That's such a great example of how collaborations can enhance so much more than just a single event or a single concert.
And something what we've been experimenting, this is my partner in crime, Kristen Vining, because we've been working together since fall 2014 from Walla Walla, Washington. She actually moved to New York City and she's teaching composition there. So she flies regularly to Boston to stay with me, and we do different projects. So some of these projects have been stirring for years, and we're morphing them into kind of different ways to reach more people. And sometimes they've started as a small experiment, and now they're spreading into bigger experiments that we're just kind of trying to see that. I think the key element is the talking with people and accessibility, that we don't just look at choral music. Doesn't have to be this one thing that, okay, I truly love, like, I love the masterworks, but who is in your room? Is this their best interest to be singing these masterworks? Or do the masterworks have to be treated with such, like, okay, they're up there, or can we make them also more accessible and kind of tweak things as we go? But I like the title, Talk It Out, because I'm definitely one, like, when I'm talking about it, it kind of clarifies in my head.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is what I was thinking about. Or somebody else is like, I think you're thinking this. And I'm like, exactly. I just put words to it.
Yes. My running friends are the best for that. I always am like, I have this idea. Can I just tell you about it? And they'll ask all the right questions and kind of, if you can talk it out. But I think I've identified the 3 areas. You talk it out, and then you're patient, but you're also flexible. Because as you're talking it out and you're showing patience, you're not like, this has to happen right now. You're involving the right people and you're talking about it. So you're patient, you're flexible, and then you make sure it's accessible. That's going to make a great blog post, by the way.
Okay.
Side note.
Okay, side note. I have to remember.
No, I got it. I wrote it down.
Okay, good.
Oh my goodness. It is so much fun talking to you. I feel invigorated to just like kind of reimagine directions and what we're doing. It's such a entrepreneurial side of what we do in the choir world. Is there anything else you want to talk about related to community college music education, equity, accessibility, diversity? I mean, you've given us some great thoughts for today.
I feel like there's so much more to talk about it that I don't even know. Like, I feel like I've just kind of scraped the surface, because so often I also didn't really have a full picture of what I was getting into. I was hired to build a choral program, and I built it. And then the pandemic again happened. And as we all know, it has impacted a lot of the community college students. And there's so many ways how the world can shake our world in the community college. For example, right now, the Orange Line, that we have a stop on the Orange Line for our school. The entire Orange Line is closed for a month. So how do our students get to school? So there's like the aspect that the world has to, like, I don't know. I always had this like highbrow mind before working at Bunker Hill that, okay, this is school and school is so important, and kind of the academia. And then you realize that, okay, academia is important and like school is important. It's important that you get your degree and everything. But life has to also happen.
Yes.
And it will happen regardless, like whether you want it to or not. Every single student has a life beyond the school building. And how do we make sure that we are open and accessible to all the students? So I think that's something that we're all working on. But there's never enough, that in a way that there's never enough we do, and it's a fine line to how much do you demand and how much you give. So I guess, I don't know, I have more questions. I feel like the longer I teach, the more questions I have than actually answers, and to feel like that I need to learn more. It's the endless need to learn more and kind of do better.
I call it Swiss cheese brain. Yeah,
oh, really?
I feel like every single time I look, I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain is like Swiss cheese. There's a new hole there. Yes. And I need to go learn something. But for me, that's where the podcast comes into place. When I started the podcast, one of the reasons, the main reason was so my students could meet some incredible people. And I thought that was really important because, like you, my students it's a regional campus. So they're choosing to come someplace that is somewhat close to home-ish. Most of them don't live on campus, that type of thing. But they don't really ever leave the town. And I wanted them to meet people, but then I also wanted to have opportunities to fill the Swiss cheese holes as they popped up. I don't even eat cheese, by the way.
Swiss cheese. That's a good way to put it, because there's so much going on, and it's like, okay, how do I keep it all together?
Right. And I mean, I guess cheese eventually goes bad, but I always think if like the older the cheese, like the more expensive it is. Again, I don't eat cheese, so I probably should find a new analogy, but I keep thinking there's a big, huge chunk of Swiss cheese in my brain, and there are more Swiss cheese holes all the time.
Love it.
This has been so much fun to talk to you. I am so pumped. This is the first of many conversations I'm sure we have, that we will have as we unpack this. How do we continue to show up for the students who need us in a variety of ways? And what does that look like in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world? And I know that having you on the committee is going to bring some really fantastic resources for the ACDA community and beyond. I always give the guests the opportunity to say one thing that really matters, the one thing you want them to remember when they walk away from this episode. What is that one thing for you today?
That everybody can sing. If you can speak, you can sing. There's different levels of training, but sing. Sing. Whether you're a musician, whatever, singer, sing. And I think that's the key point here. We often, as singers, we take ourselves so seriously and like, okay, I can't sing, and like, okay, my voice is so affected, and my voice is pretty totally shut after the pandemic. But alas, just keep singing. So that's the kind of what I'm thinking about. Back to my summer in Europe. That's the one thing that people sing and they enjoy, and it doesn't have to be necessarily organized singing, but just singing. More singing in the world will make it a better place.
I love it. Oh, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. We'll have you back, I'm sure, but we're excited to have you on the committee.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
What was your favorite part? I love when she talked about the different stories that her students bring to the room, but then how important it is to realize that every student has a life outside of academia, outside of your choir room, there's just life outside of singing, but that everyone should be singing together, and everyone should find a way to sing, because as Riikka said, everyone can sing. I took so many notes on this one, and I'm really excited to put together the quote cards. So I hope that you enjoyed getting to know Riikka. I hope that you will stay tuned for some of the fantastic resources that she is sure to bring to the world now that she is part of the ANC committee. And it is such an honor to have these conversations. If you have ideas, let me know, emilybirch.org/contact. If you want to join the community, patreon.com/musicedmatters. And if no one's told you today, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially each individual story that comes into our space.